I'm Andy Villamarzo with SBLive Sports Florida, and here join us for the Coastal. It's our 5th episode, and we got a special guest with us here today. We have Dan Laforest with FloridaHighSchool.com and the Orlando Touchdown Club. And Dan, welcome to the show. And I know it's a lot of exciting things going on in Central Florida when it comes to high school football.
Well, first of all, I'm excited to kick off 2023. You know, it always seems like we're looking at the calendar to see when football season starts with all the off-season activity with 7-on-7s and training camps and everything else. So, you know, it's go time. It's week one, and everybody's preparing for it.
Absolutely. And you got to see one of the teams that was in our Florida Power 25 poll. They come in at number 12, a team that a lot of people believe in Class 3M is going to be a contender in the Jones Fighting Tigers. They beat Jesuit 38-18 at Camping World Stadium. Really made a strong impression on a lot of folks, including yourself. Kind of talk about just Jones really coming right out of the gates. I know we can only take so much from preseason action because you play your starters, you play a little bit of your backups. But I know in talking to you behind the scenes, I mean, it sounds like Jones and Jesuit, they went toe to toe with their guys.
Yeah, it was full tilt the whole way. I mean, you know, I went and talked to head coach at Jesuit, Matt Thompson, and Elijah Williams at Jones before the game. And I asked them, I said, you know, what's the format for tonight? And they said, we're going. You know, we're not planning on playing JV. We're not planning on playing anybody. This is going to be a full tilt game. And why not? I mean, they're playing in Camping World Stadium, which is a college stadium. So, you know, it was every bit of it. And, you know, special teams was live. Everybody was live. It was a game.
And 38-18, I mean, if that doesn't tell you how good the Jones Fighting Tigers are against a very good, well-coached Jesuit team. And I would say, I don't want to say an unsung hero or somebody that we didn't expect kind of to step up to the plate, but Trevor Jackson transferred from West Orange over to Jones. That was big news around Orlando when it happened. And we know he went to Elite 11 over in California and really had a strong showing there. But it was the sophomore, Darren Coleman, who came onto the scene in relief of Jackson, and he throws 5 touchdowns. He just wows everybody, and he's the talk of after the game. Everyone's talking about Coleman this, Coleman that, Coleman this, Coleman that. I mean, talk about just how much that kind of brought his stock up. He's already somebody that a lot of people are saying is one of the top quarterbacks of the 2026 class, but I know he impressed you.
There's no question about it. But, you know, I want to also address the danger of a quarterback transferring, which I think Trevor Jackson right now, let's not take anything away from him. He's an Elite 11 finalist, had an amazing season last year with West Orange. I think it's just a learning curve for him and getting comfortable in that offense. You know, when you spend 4 or 5 weeks versus 12 months with your team, I think it's just a learning curve for Trevor. So I don't want to take anything away from, you know, there is no quarterback controversy. I think, you know, Elijah Williams, the head coach for Jones, I think his plan going into this was to play both quarterbacks, and he did that. And Trevor did settle down a little bit. He got the whole fourth quarter. He did settle down. He was actually looking at the field a little bit differently. But, you know, Darren Coleman, you know, again, don't take anything away from this kid. He is a future star. But one thing about that game that I think nobody's really talking about is how Jones' offensive line controlled that game. They ran the ball very well. And anytime you run the ball, it opens up the passing game.
Yeah, and talking about that line of scrimmage, I know they got a Texas commitment up front on that defensive line, and DeAndre Robinson, and he's somebody that I know all opposing offensive linemen don't want to face this fall, and he's somebody that I haven't met in person. I've just seen pictures, but even to somebody like yourself, and if you don't know Dan Laforest, he's a taller guy, you know, towers over me. I'm a little guy, but DeAndre Robinson, talk about him standing next to you. I know that's a Texas commitment and everything else. He's one of the toughest defensive linemen in the state.
Yeah, DeAndre was actually at his signing day, and I've been around him for the last several years. So I got to take a picture with him, and you're right. He stands toe-to-toe with me. And anytime you're talking about a high school player that's 6'4" and weighs over 300 pounds and is built the way he is a serious college prospect. And he really came in late in the recruiting process. But I think what you're going to find with him is he's a grown man, and a lot of times he's going to be playing against some guys that, you know, give an example, Jalen Carter. You know, we saw what he did at Popkin, and, you know, he continued that at the University of Georgia. I think DeAndre is going to fit in really well in SEC football.
Absolutely. He's already making waves on the next level, and Dontre Robinson be somebody following right in his footsteps and from the Orlando area. Well, we go a little bit beyond the Orlando area. We head over to the East Coast where people would probably like to vacation, bring their motorcycle, maybe see a race, Daytona Beach, home of the Mainland Buccaneers. And they were a team that they were just this close to win the Class 3 state championship. And we both saw Lake Wales just come away narrowly against the Buccaneers. And I know Travis Rowland is biting at the bit just to get back on the field. And they're going to go against Rick Darlington's DeLand Bulldogs, which that should be a great week 1 matchup. But Dan, we got to talk about Mainland. They're number 14 in our Power 25 here. And I mean, what kind of stands out to you about this Buccaneers team?
I think it's just the pure athleticism. And first of all, you have to talk about Daytona. You got to remember sunscreen too, Andy, because it is a beach, but the world's most famous beach. But no, I think you've got to talk about the athleticism. They've got, I think, 6 or 7 Power 5 players on that roster, whether it's on offense or defense, and that's leading up by that mammoth of a defensive end that's playing tight end as well as LJ McCray.
Yeah. I mean, they definitely showed out defensively, and that was something that really stood out to me is the amount of returners that are coming back on this defense, plus some kids that have come in. We know about the transfer bug that was happening over the summer. We'll touch on that maybe a little bit later, but just Mainland is the team I think that heads into this season at the top of the Class 3S rankings, and just I know they're coming back to try to, I guess, right the wrong of last year and just falling short. And I mean, do you feel like they'll be able to pull it off this season?
Well, I think that the best way to phrase it is take that next step. I mean, Travis Rowland comes back to his alma mater. I believe this is his 3rd or 4th season coming back, and I believe it's his 3rd season. So to be able to accomplish building a program in such a short period of time, you've got to give him a lot of credit. You're right. I mean, they were literally a score away from winning it all. And but yeah, I think you've got enough guys returning where they felt that sting coming out of Fort Lauderdale last December that they remember what it feels like. And that's what you want as a head coach. You want guys to remember. You want them to feel. They want that feeling to continue in the offseason. So yeah, I think Mainland has a very strong case to get back as a 3S contender.
Well, we'll move into another suburban classification as we go through all these Central Florida schools, which there's a bevy of them. We could talk about so many just programs that are going to be in contention. We're going to move to 4S, where Kissimmee Osceola, they were a team. They were in that state semifinal against Lakeland. I was at that game. They were just a few plays from beating the Dreadnoughts, which would have been I don't know, probably an upset, but I felt like those teams are that close. And they got a really good running back in Tavion Swint. They got a quarterback transfer in Anthony Powers coming over from Swanee. I mean, what are your feelings on the Cowboys? And they come in number 16 for us in our Power 25. I know it all starts with Swint.
Yeah, and Swint is probably not going to play the first few weeks. So he didn't play in the spring game. I think they're trying to get him healthy going into his junior campaign. But you've got to remember Osceola has always been built on power, and their offense and defensive lines haven't changed. Elijah Mendez is getting a lot of attention right now as a 2025 linebacker, and he's got it all. He's got the height, he's got the size, he's got the speed. And I think we're going to see that. Now, Apopka played them in a very close game. In fact, Osceola missed. And this is another game we can talk to where they played a game. I mean, they weren't worried about getting JV time and all that other stuff. But they missed a field goal in the closing seconds to lose to Apopka 16-15 last week. But, talking about two programs that like to get down and dirty, that exactly is that kind of game between Osceola and Apopka. But I think Osceola, Coach Eric Pinellas has an amazing staff over there with Chad Mascow running the offense, and they're going to be a contender, and they've got a heck of a schedule. They got Lakeland coming over to Kissimmee this year, and I'm planning on being there for that one.
Oh, they met twice last season. I mean, both matchups went down to the wire in the fourth quarter. The Cowboys and the Dreadnoughts, just right down the road from each other on I-4. So we know that can be easily a rivalry if they continue to keep on playing in the coming years and they keep having these close endings. So I definitely think the Cowboys should be a player, even with Swint being out for a little bit, but I think they'll be able to, in the playoffs, they just got to get there, and then they'll have Swint back. And Anthony Powers should be somebody that makes some noise at the quarterback position. So I expect the Cowboys to be there. We're going to stay in, or actually, we're going to move over to Metro. We got a Sanford Seminole with a new head coach. Eric Lodge goes up to South Carolina, takes a job up there, and you enter an alum in Carl Calhoun, and he used to play linebacker for the Seminoles. So if anyone knows Bo Keat, it's him. And the Seminoles are loaded. Let's face it. They got multiple quarterbacks with Carson and David Parks, and I know Parks has been playing some other positions. But what's your take on the Seminoles heading into 2023?
I think the Seminoles got more dangerous when Carson Sequinski-Lasky came back over and transferred back from Lake Highland Prep. And this is why. It frees up David Parks to not be the quarterback. And we saw that in the spring game. Them in Edgewater. And again, the way I understood it, they played a little bit of JV. They did some different things. But he is now he's a tool. He's a weapon. Because when they break the huddle, you don't know if he's lining up at quarterback. You don't know if he's going to line up at H-back, if they're going to spread him out wide. And let me tell you something. The kid gets the ball in his hands, he's dangerous. And whether, he's lining up at quarterback, he broke off the first play of the game, 80 yards for a touchdown from a quarterback position. But when you line him up and you get him the ball in certain areas, I tell you what, there ain't no cornerback going to bring him down.
And it sounds like he's kind of playing like a Taysom Hill kind of role, is he not?
I think that is a great analogy, is Taysom Hill, because he can be used in many different ways. And I think, Coach Calhoun and the offensive staff are looking at him that way, which creates some major matchup problems because, again, you break the huddle, you don't know where he's going to end up. And I think he's going to be the X factor for the Seminoles this year. But, it gives them a solid quarterback to lead the passing game. And then Parks can run both positions. He can run some quarterback. He's familiar. He's comfortable playing the quarterback position. But like I said, when he's not playing at quarterback is where he's going to be probably more dangerous.
Well, we're definitely going to keep an eye on the Seminoles. We know Sanford Seminoles always in the mix when it comes to 4M, and they do play in that district of death that you've been telling me a lot about this offseason. It's just a brutal schedule they have put together, and they do have a trip to Cocoa that's included in that. Cocoa,
they're going down to Vero Beach. I mean, you're right. It's going to be a brutal schedule, not to mention the fact that, taken from John Santucci, the district of death, when you've got Lake Mary and Apopka in that district, it's going to be brutal. But to have, they got Osceola here in a few weeks. So, they have got a brutal schedule, but, let's not forget Seminole is based on defense, and Carl Calhoun was a defensive coordinator the last 2 years. That Seminole defense will be solid. It's just going to be interesting to see how they put it all together. And also Carl Calhoun being a first-year head coach.
Absolutely. I mean, he's got big shoes to fill with Lodge heading out of state. It's going to be interesting following them throughout the year. We jump to another program that is a little bit in transition, but not because of the coach, because of the running back that left, and that's Edgewater. We're talking about the Fighting Eagles, and they lose Cedric Baxter, but a graduation, and now he's over in Texas, the Lone Star State. And I think a lot of questions have been, who are going to be the playmakers to replace his production from last season? And I mean, the names we think of are really the guys they have defensively here. You got Kai Bates, an LSU commitment. You got the NC State commitment, Josh Alexander Fulton. So, kind of talk about Edgewater heading into the season. Obviously, question marks about the offense a little bit. They do have Michael Clayton II, very good young quarterback. But, I mean, who's gonna be running the rock for him, or who's going to be the one kind of navigating this offense, making sure they get yards and touchdowns?
Yeah, and that's going to be Caden Shields Dutton. First of all, you don't replace a Cedric Baxter. He is a generational back. And I've told a lot of people I haven't seen a running back talent like that since Sammy Smith in the 80s. And, but Caden's going to do a wonderful job. He did a great job in the spring. He did a wonderful job here during the workouts during the summer. and he's committed to FAU. So, he's going to be more than efficient running that football. And I think that's going to be the key for the Edgewater Eagles this year is, they depended so much on Cedric Baxter the last 2 years. Can they get a balanced attack with a young quarterback with Michael Clayton?
Absolutely. I mean, their offense, definitely the one time I got to see him was in 2020 against Mitchell. It was in the region final. I know they ended up going to Niceville, I believe, and then they won over there, and then they went on to states to face Aquinas. But, I mean, he was just I would say a sophomore then, and he was extremely impressive in that game. So I couldn't imagine. I didn't get to see him as a senior, but everything I heard about him and how much he meant to the Fighting Eagles offense, the type of production he was putting up yardage-wise and touchdowns, hurts. It hurts no matter who you are, unless if you're, I guess, St. Thomas Aquinas or Miami Central. I guess you absorb that and somebody else steps up. But we're going to move to Cocoa. They were last year's Class 2S state champs, and Coach Ryan Schneider over there. He had Blake Boda last year, the Southpaw, and now he's over at Coastal Carolina. But to replace him, he's got Brady Hart, and he's a pretty good sophomore quarterback. I've seen a little bit of him in the film, but what's your take on him taking over for Boda, and do you think he can be every bit as good as Blake? I mean, I know it's a hard shoes to fill, but I know they've been talking a lot about him.
Well, I don't think it's that big of a task as well as Boda played last year, and he was an incredible talent. Brady's a sophomore, and he's got the same size right now as a senior. So, I think the biggest thing for Brady Hart and the biggest advantage he has is Ryan Schneider's his head coach. And Ryan is one heck of a quarterback coach and offensive coordinator. So, he's going to have him mentally. But I'm going to tell you, I met him a couple of times over the summer. And the thing about Brady Hart that impressed me was his maturity. And I think he's going to be able to take on that type of pressure. Because, again, you talk about Cocoa Tigers, and we're going to see it this week when they play at Jones, right? I think this is a statement game. Cocoa, again, has an amazing schedule. They've got to go back down to St. Thomas Aquinas again. They have a loaded schedule. Is who runs the ball the best? Why put it all on these quarterbacks? Because both teams have great wide receiver skills. Cocoa has outstanding athletes, but who's going to control the line of scrimmage? And Cocoa finds a way to control that line of scrimmage. I think that they're going to be in the same boat. They're going to be very dangerous to contend.
Yeah, they're a team that always seems to find their way. And I know last year they had a few losses, but it ended up being those losses ended up really helping them through the course of the season. And then once they got to the playoffs, it was almost like kind of a breeze for them to get through and make their way to states. They got up to Tallahassee, played a thriller against might as well have been the hosts, FSU High, because they're in their backyard, and they were able to win pretty much on the road. So Cocoa, once again, they're going to be contenders for the 2S state championship, and I know Ryan Schneider's got the talent to do it again. We're going to jump to a team you're very familiar with, a team that you're an alum of, actually, the Popka Blue Darters, and we talk a lot about this team because for all the years under Rick Darlington and winning state titles, getting there, and then passing it over to Jeff Rolson. They've continued that tradition of getting there. They've been close but no cigar, and last year was the same. It was a heartbreaker in overtime. But, Dan, I know you've been talking a lot about this Tyson Davidson at quarterback, a sophomore. And, I mean, why worry? Because it seems like halfway through the season, the Blue Darters kind of flipped the switch, and then they
call it the week 6. It's week 6, the switch, and you're right. A lot of questions have always come up with Apopka in the beginning of the season. And I think a lot of that, the reason is because a lot of the talent that they have steps up. They have to get their game mode on. They got to get some things polished. And I don't think that story changes this year with the Apopka Blue Darters. They've got their talent, but do they have a Caven Call? Do they have a Ty Robbins or a Ty Ray, an offensive line? I think these are the questions that always come up with Apopka is, it's talent's coming. You just don't know what their name is. But they do have, and Tyson Davison, listen, let's be real. Apopka did not lose the state championship. Columbus survived that state championship. I mean, that was an overtime thriller and one heck of a game. But Tyson Davison was a freshman. He has developed quite a bit, grown physically. His maturity has come along very well here in the offseason. I think Tyson is going to have a differential. He's going to play more of a role in that Apopka offense, which typically has been that single wing. And I think you're going to be surprised to see what they do here in 2023.
I'm excited just to hear they may be doing something else than the single wing. So if they're going to more spread,
I think more teams are going to be a little bit more excited because I'm telling you, preparing for a single wing is very difficult. But make no mistake, Apopka will never abandon the single wing offense.
That is something that I think through over the years, no matter who the head coach has been, that is the staple of the Blue Darters is that single wing. You think of Apopka, you think of that back getting in motion, and then you're trying to figure who's going to have the ball, who's going to have it. Is it going to be a quarterback, fullback, wingback? We don't know, but they somehow get a ton of yards and they're winning games. So that's something that Apopka has done well for so long. Let's talk about some teams that not in our Power 25, but they're going to be teams that are going to make some noise this season. A team that Rick Darlington ended up at, and we mentioned a little bit earlier, the DeLand Bulldogs. Got to talk about year two of Darlington. And, I mean, DeLand, I believe, is going to be a player this season.
Yeah, and I said this on a previous show earlier last week, is Rick Darlington in year two should scare everybody. He has a reputation of coming into a program and molding it his way. And when those kids buy in, look out. And they've got a young man that is going to be an offensive threat, and that's Javon Ross. Kid had 2 touchdowns, last week. TJ Moore, also incredible athlete. Wyatt Darlington, Rick's youngest son, is going to be a force on both sides of the ball. But MJ Smokes, their defensive tackle, I think is one of the low-profile guys that you haven't heard a whole lot about, and he's a tough individual. I got to spend a little time with him during the Central Florida Media Days, and he's impressive, and I can't wait to see what they do. But they got a big game. They got Mainland this week at home, and I think that's going to be a great matchup out of the gate to test both programs.
Absolutely. And we jumped to a team that you've told me a lot about. And I know they got some talent, but you feel they're going to be the team that really surprises everyone. And that's the Evans Trojans. You've told me they're going to be the team that kind of comes out and really takes people by surprise.
I think the biggest thing with Evans is that they're not going to surprise somebody, is that they could surprise somebody. Let's understand their district. They're in that district of death with Apopka, Lake Mary, and Seminole. Those are power programs. I think what's impressive about Evans is if they're overlooked. They're going to win the games they're supposed to. Let me rephrase that. If they win the games they're supposed to win, then who overlooks them? Does an Apopka overlook them before they play an Edgewater, or before they play a Seminole or Lake Mary, and vice versa? Does Lake Mary overlook them? Does Seminole overlook them? I think that's where Evans comes in, and Evans can be somebody who creates some damage, and they might sneak in. If they can pull off one of those 3 games and they win the games they're supposed to, they could sneak into the playoffs.
We'll definitely keep an eye out on them in that district of death. I know that's going to be tough to navigate through, but never know who they might catch napping. And a team that's also in that district, they got a young budding quarterback, 2026 signal caller is Noah Grubbs of Lake Mary. Lake Mary's a team that they beat Sanford Seminole in the playoffs last year, albeit without Luke Rucker. David Parks at quarterback, and we know he did an admirable job for the Seminoles. But Lake Mary, I mean, talk about them and the Rams. Do you feel like they're a team that's about to take the next step?
Absolutely. Lake Mary can play with anybody in the state, and the quarterback position, obviously, having him in there, again, a young guy. I asked Scott Perry about him last season. I said, what was the biggest difference between him and Gunnar Smith? Gunnar Smith, broke Timmy McLean's passing record in Seminole County. Timmy broke Jeff Driscoll. So a lot of talent in the quarterback position in Seminole County. And he said, it's the leadership. The kid is young, but he steps into the huddle and people listen. he is a leader. And watching him in the offseason, Noah does a wonderful job controlling himself. And that's a key thing for a quarterback, right? You got to command respect. And Noah's impressive physically, but also his understanding of the game and the situation, I think, is what's going to make him one of the top prospects in the nation.
Well, we'll definitely be keeping an eye on Noah Grubbs and the Rams all season long. And we go from quarterback to another quarterback.
Well, let me go back, Andy, if you don't mind, let me go back and talk about Lake Mary, because let's talk about the X factors. You've got Caden Harshberger, you've got Logan Cook at wide receiver, and these kids are tough. I mean, they're tough at the line of scrimmage. They can get off of press coverage. They can make a difference. But I think the key is Lake Mary's going to run the ball a little bit this year. And how effective can they be behind their big offensive tackle, Joshua Raymond, who's committed to Vandy? Not to mention the fact on the defensive side of the ball, they've probably been as solid as they've been in the recent years. So I just wanted to bring that up about Lake Mary. It's not just, Noah Grubbs. I think they've got a lot of pieces around Noah that's going to make it very interesting.
Absolutely. The Rams definitely, you got to have more than just the quarterback in order to compete for a district championship, especially in a district like that. And I go from quarterback to quarterback only because Olympia, they're a team, and talking with a lot of people, Wanganeas, just this team, the Titans. I saw them against Apopka last year. Felt like they're a team that can kind of be a fringe district championship or someone that can make some noise. But what's your take on the Titans as a kind of our last team we touch on out of Orlando?
Well, they had a number of transfers come in from various schools, but Travis Gabriel, the head coach, has done a wonderful job building this team. He's had a lot of young guys that are now coming into their senior year, and he's got a Romello Ware coming in. He's got Cameron Ware. Both of them are great athletes, but I think a couple of the kids that we're going to have to take a look at there is I escape his name right now. I'm looking for it right now. It's Jalen Thompson, the North Carolina commit, 6'1", 170, defensive back. I think he's a difference maker. But I think what's going to be very interesting about Olympia is their offense and defensive line. They've got some size. And if they can control the ball and they can have a balanced attack, I think they're going to do a lot of things offensively. And defensively, they've always had strong talent at the linebacker position and defensive line.
I'll definitely be keeping an eye on Olympia and Class 4M. They're a team I got to see against Popka, and then I saw them against Eastlake in the playoffs. And though they didn't defeat Eastlake on the road, they were right there with Eastlake the entire way. I mean, that was an upset brewing. And they got West Orange in that same district, and West Orange has controlled that district for the last few years. So it's going to be very interesting to see how both of those programs kind of trend toward each other toward the end of the season, because we don't know who that district winner is going to be, and you can't mark in West Orange just yet. No, got to keep an eye on Olympia. Last couple minutes here, Dan. I've been asking everybody around the region, give me a surprise player. I know you've got one. Who's one player that kind of been laying low under the radar that people haven't been talking about?
I think it's going to be Kingston Shaw, linebacker at Apopka. Again, built for the position. I think it's the first time. I talked to Jeff Olson yesterday. He finally feels like he has a Power 5 linebacker, and Apopka's always had the small, quick linebackers. The kid's already 6'3", 210, 15 pounds, and hits like a truck. And he's a 2026 kid that's just been overshadowed. He was a freshman last year, and when you've got, Caven Call, and you've got these other defensive stars that get a lot of the attention. I think he's going to be the one that is going to be turning some heads this season and in the next couple of seasons to come.
Well, you can't have an Apopka defense without having a middle linebacker that definitely controls that. And I know they had a hard hitter in the middle last year, so it's going to be interesting to watch the Blue Darters and the rest of the Central Florida teams. And that wraps up this episode of the Coastal. And Dan, thank you as always. We definitely got to have you back on during the season. We got to revisit some of these teams and kind of talk about where they're at mid-season.
Andy, I appreciate you having me, my friend.
All right. Well, that's Dan Laforest of FloridaHighSchoolFootball.com and the Orlando Touchdown Club. This is this episode of the Coastal, and we thank you for joining us.
Yes, sir.